Hi everyone, we're going to do some boiled books. So I am using watercolor paper, and this is 140 pound watercolor paper, so it's fairly stiff, and I'm tearing it into booklets, into folios, so that shape and that shape. You can get either of these shapes out of a sheet of this watercolor paper, which is 22 by 30 inches. So to tear it up, I just tear it with a ruler and I line it up on my grid so that I've got the same amount of grid lines on either side of the edges here. And then I know that I can tear it down the middle here and have it be pretty close to exactly right. So to tear it, I'm putting pressure on the ruler, and I'm just in small increments, moving my hand as I go, lifting the paper and tearing it against the ruler, right to the bottom. And so you see that gives me 2 sheets, like that. I can tear these into portrait size, or portrait style, or portrait shaped booklets. So this is now 14 3/4 inches. And I want to find the center and center it on my grid here. I don't usually find measuring it exactly is very effective because I make too many mistakes with the measuring. So generally I just check to see, is this kind of about where I want it? 14 3/4 would be 7 3/8. So that looks like about right. I've got it lined up square on my grid, the same amount of paper on each side, and I will tear it again. It shifted there, but I didn't let it move off the ruler, so it should be okay. And as you can see, that's good. So this one will get folded in half this way. And when I fold it, I start the fold, line it up on the edges and the bottom and the top as evenly as possible. And then before I crease it, I carefully pick it up and I dampen it on a sponge, like that. And then, because this is very heavy watercolor paper, if you don't dampen it a little bit, it could crack. This paper is pretty good quality, so it doesn't usually crack, but it's possible that it might. And then you get a little unsightly edge. So I'm just folding it over, lining it up on this side, kind of holding it tight so that it's still all lined up. Just tapping it a bit on this damp sponge, and then I can crease it down and put the crease in more firmly with my bone folder. So that's 2 sheets that are the portrait shape. And you can also do the landscape shape. And so it will be, you have to find a spot where your line is just about even with the center. Line this up on the grid. I find this a lot easier than measuring every page, and then I can line it up and tear it. Same way as before. Move your hand down, small tears, like that. And these get folded into a landscape format. Dampen a little bit on the edge. It expands the paper and keeps it from cracking. And then I do a little crease with the bone folder. And it makes a nice, tidy looking signature. So I kind of get it to that point, and then just a little tap. It just needs to be a bit moist on that edge, just enough to make the paper swell a tiny bit, so that when you fold it, it doesn't crack. There we go. So I pre-folded and cut a bunch of signatures. So I've got a bunch that are the portrait shape and another bunch that are the landscape shape. So that's our starting point. And the next thing we want to do is to take a look at the plant material. So I've just come in from collecting all these leaves, and there are a variety of things here. Some of the ones I'm going to want to use first are on the bottom, so I'm probably going to just dump this out on the floor, and I hope I didn't bring too many bugs in with it. So I've got rose leaves and peony, delphinium, cosmos, things like that. I've got a few flowers. I've got some rudbeckia flowers and leaves, a few leaves from the tomato plant. And I'm going to set these down. And I'm going to bind the foiled book together between some ceramic tiles. So these ones I've picked because they will fit flatwise into my cooking pot. I have a big stainless steel stock pot that I use only for crafts. I do not use it for cooking. And the tiles need to, unless you're going to use a lot of water, I'm only going to use a small amount of water, so I want the tiles to be able to lay down flat. If you had bigger tiles, and I do have some, and need to stand them up to fit them into the pot, then you're going to have water to cover the whole thing. And I just soon not use that much water, so I'm going to try to do it this way. And I want my pages to roughly fit on here. So I'll use this for the portrait size. And this is just a couple of broken floor tiles from our bathroom reno. I've used them before. I'm going to use those for the landscape style. They don't quite fit, but that's not so important, as long as they kind of hold everything together. And they get tied on. I'm going to tie them on with these pieces of, this is some kind of like shoelace. These are just pieces of cloth selvage that I've torn off a sheet or something and used to tie the bundles up before. So I'm going to set that aside, and we'll start with this portrait style one. Portrait format. So the first thing we want to do is put some leaves directly on the tile, because that's going to be kind of the front and back cover, if you will, of the... And I'm putting them upside down because the backs of the leaves actually give a better impression than the fronts of the leaves. So I'm going to start with something like that. And you don't need to be too fussy about it. I'm going to do it this way. So I'm putting this on top of that, opening it up, and I'm going to add some more leaves in here. So here's some rudbeckia. Now on this one I'm going to have prints on both sides, so I want to have some parts of it that are upside down and some parts of it that are right side up, so that I get prints, nice prints on both sides. Some of these things I've never printed with before, so I don't really know what they're going to do, but we'll give it a try. So then it's a matter of just laying in the leaves and plants, squash it down. Add some more. And another layer. When I put this together into a book, each of these pages will be its own signature because they're fairly heavy pages. So I don't need to nest them, and that way the prints will match. There'll be mirror images on each side of the page to some extent. But if I have a lot of material like that last one, you're actually going to get a different print on each half of the page. I haven't tried flowers very much before, so I thought it was a good thing to try on this book. The pot that I'm going to put them in is sitting on the stove in the other room, and it is getting ready to boil. It's not quite boiling yet. So it makes kind of a lumpy sandwich, but you just keep layering things on, and if you've got things that are sticking out too much, you can snip them off, stick them in somewhere else. That's Cosmos. Here's a couple of Cosmos flowers. This is lilac leaves. They don't have a lot of veining on them, so I'm not sure how well they'll work, but we'll give them a try. Roses are very nice. The roses work very well, I have found in the past. And if you leave some white spaces, you'll have room for writing or adding text or doing other things. So you don't have to cover every inch of the paper with leaves, but it depends on how dense you want your pictures, your images to be. I'll rearrange that one. Here's some, this is raspberry leaves. So I put some face up and some face down so that I'm getting nice prints on both sides of the paper. And sometimes you have to just rearrange them as you go along. Sometimes plants have these stalks in the middle and you have to cut them out. Also got some Virginia Creeper here. Okay, last layer. And then the tile. So I'm trying to make it sort of reasonably level. Some people clamp these with C-clamps or woodworking clamps. Some people use wooden boards to hold it together. You can use anything that you can sort of clamp down. You don't want it to be too, it doesn't need to be too tight, but you want it to not have anything leaking out. So okay, so there it is. Nothing's sticking out too far. I'll just chop off that one, but nothing's too badly sticking out. So I'm going to take you into the other room where the pot is cooking. So here we are in the kitchen, and I have a pot of water. It's got about a liter, about 4 liters, 3 or 4 liters of water in there. I hope it'll be deep enough for my book. I think so once I put it in there. And before I add the book, I'm going to add about a cup of vinegar. And you can see a little thing in the bottom there. That is a rusty canning lid. And I'm putting it in there because rust helps to make the color adhere to your paper better. It's kind of a mordant, but I'm going to add vinegar too because that's an excellent mordant. So, about a cup. It's not too exact a science here, not measuring too much. So it stopped, kind of stopped the boiling, but it should return. It was just on the edge of boiling. I'll just turn it up a tiny bit. So I've got a spot here where I can hang on to the book and set it down in there. I'm going to put it right down flat. Oh, my rusty lid is interfering. So. And there it goes. And yes, everything is covered. So I want it to absorb some of the liquid into the pages, and so you can see there's air bubbles coming out from among the pages, and we're starting to have more of a boil now. Turn it back down to 8. I want it to sit in there for a few minutes. One fellow says he leaves it in for 7 minutes before he adds any coloring agent, like a dye. And that gives enough time for the liquid to seep into the pages and make sure the pages are all completely wet. I think you get different effects depending on how you do it, so you might not be too worried about having them all be able to bleed in along the lines. The plant material acts kind of as a resist and keeps the dye from coloring all the paper, all the edges of the paper, and all the center where the plant material is really thick. And so that's part of getting the effect that you have of these boiled books. I had some dye mixed up already, so this is a kind of purple dye, and I'm going to add it now because I'm not too concerned about waiting too much longer. I'm going to rinse this and add a bit more as well. Usually when you have fresh dye, you get a fairly dark color, but I've also used the same dye base, the same actual dyes, like not even changed out of the pot, just left it in there, added another book, and then I get a paler color. So this, you can use any kind of dye. This is Dylon Madonna Blue, little capsule thing that you can probably get at any fabric store. I've got some really ancient dyes that are fiber reactive dyes. These are Deca, and that's not even in English, so no idea what it says. I think they're in German. But these were given to me years ago by a friend who used to dye things and decided to get out of that business. So I've had those cans sitting around in my studio for quite a while. Time to use them up. So this is going to sit here and boil. A lot of people on the videos on the internet say an hour to an hour and a half. I have found that 45 minutes is plenty of time for it to absorb enough dye, and with the vinegar and the iron from the rusty lids. So I'm going to leave this for 45 minutes. And when we come back, I will take it out of the pot and show you how to rinse it. Okay, it's been 45 minutes, 48 minutes, and I'm going to take this out. I'm using a rubber glove because it's still boiling hot. I'm going to pick this up, let some of the water drain out, and hold it over a pail and take it into the other room. Okay, here we are in the laundry room, and with my laundry tub I've put about an inch of water in the bottom. It's cool water, and I'm set the bundle in there, and I'm going to take the wrapping off. Let's have a chance to cool a little bit. You can see that it's made a pattern on my tile, but most of that washes off. And now I'm going to take these off because they don't have as good a grip. I'm just going to take the leaves off gently. I've got a garbage can just below here, and I'm just going to put them in there. And you can see our first image. So you're getting a little bit of the green of the chlorophyll in the leaves and the color of the dye. A friend of mine that does this reuses these leaves sometimes, and finds that if she uses a different colored dye, she'll get a little bit of the purple color on the paper where the leaves are, because the leaves retain a bit of the dye and it adds it to the next batch. But I've got more than enough leaves to do as many batches as I want to today. So there's the paper. I just kind of gently, this is watercolor paper, so it can stand a fair amount of abrasion, but I'm going to try and gently take off any leaf residue, any bugs that managed to get in there. There you have it. So I'm going to rinse the rest of these, take this bundle apart. I usually try to keep them relatively in the same order so that I can, when I put them together into a book, the pages are in the order that I dyed them. That's not essential, but just something I like to do. But there you have it. So this dye is not too strong. I've got a fairly pale color here. So I think when I do the next, I've put together another set of leaves and pages, and I think I will add some more dye to the pot and finish that off later today. I can add that to the end of this video to show you what it looks like, but basically here's what we're getting. The leaves are still not totally disintegrated, so you could reuse them. But as I said, I have a lot of them, so I'm not going to bother with that. Some of them are more obvious than others, patterns. You get a little more pattern when it dries, and some of these leaves I was trying for the first time, so I don't really know what they're going to do. Some of them I have had experience with and know that they make nice patterns. Like there's Virginia Creeper making a nice pattern there. That's Delphinium. It always makes a very nice pattern. Usually roses, this is roses here. They make a nice pattern, and that's Shasta Daisy. Interesting effects. So here are all the papers rinsed, and I've spread some scrap paper, old drawing paper, on the floor, and I've laid them out with the insides of each folio facing down. I'll let them dry like this for a while, and then I may turn them over, make sure they're dry on the other side. They wrinkle a bit, but you can press them with an iron to flatten them out if they're too wrinkly, or put them in a press, and I find they flatten out fairly well. So I've got quite an interesting bunch of patterns on these, some on the inside as well.